Hi there, it's Jeff here with a look at the latest Human Development Report. The 34th edition of the report has been published, and I thought I'd just share with you some of the key results. So in terms of the top 10, Switzerland comes top of the HDI rankings for 2023-24 with an HDI ranking of 0.967. That's the highest. Norway just behind. So these are the top 10 countries. Austria and the Netherlands shared 10th place. The UK, for reference, came 15th in this year's rankings. Keep in mind, of course, that the HDI is a composite measure of development progress with a 1/3 weighting attached to health, to education and to income per capita. So they use life expectancy at birth as the health metric. They use expected and mean years of schooling for the education metric. And they use gross national income, GNI per capita, adjusted for PPP and measured in dollars there on the right-hand side for the income component. So these are the top 10 countries in the world in terms of HDI. If we go down to the bottom of the rankings, Somalia had the lowest human development ranking, closely followed by South Sudan in 2023-24. And obviously, these are the countries with the lowest human development. It's not surprising. This table doesn't change too much from year to year. But interestingly, let's look at Somalia. Somalia comes bottom of the HDI rankings this year. But just yesterday, the IMF finally agreed to a substantial program of debt relief. So I think Somalia's been given something like 99% relief on its external debts. And their debt as a share of GDP will fall from about 65% to 6% under the IMF's debt relief initiative. This is a really important example because obviously with Somalia being at the bottom of the HDI table, the extent to which debt relief will free resources up to help improve basic human development outcomes, alleviate extreme poverty in that country. We wait to see what happens there. I just thought I'd pick out one or two aspects of the data. Life expectancy, of course, is part of that, is the health component. These are the countries in the world in 2023 with the lowest life expectancy at birth: Chad and Lesotho, 53 years only. All of these countries show and have a life expectancy at birth of less than 59 years. And the education and schooling component, of course, is critical, the acquisition of human capital. I've done here a pivot on the table to show the countries in the world in 23 where the mean years of schooling were less than 3 years, a quite staggering statistic. And of course in Niger that figure is 1.3. There's obviously a yawning gap, a chasm in many countries between expected years of schooling. So for example, if you have 10 years, children starting school at 6 could end expect to have to leave school at 16. So in Niger, they have 7.2 expected years of schooling, but the mean years of schooling is 1.3. And again, in Gini, for example, 10.2, a much higher figure for expected schooling years, but mean years of schooling only 2.4. And of course, this alerts us to the hard fact, that millions of young people, infants, drop out of school before completing primary and secondary education. And part of the development, of course, is trying to close some of that gap. I was listening just the other day to Rory Stewart, president of Give Directly, and his view, quite clear view, is that unconditional cash transfers given to the poorest people without conditionality attached, can help to close this gap, because some families may choose to spend it on educating a child for longer, or educating more than one child in a family. So mean years of schooling, I think, is a really important metric. Keep those figures in mind. Some countries actually outperform on HDI their GNI per capita. So Cuba is often held up as a good example of this. Cuba, in the latest figures, had a GNI per capita of just under $8,000 per capita GDP, which on that basis makes it a sort of middle-income country, low middle-income country. Yet it came in the top 100 for HDI. So Cuba's HDI ranking was 40 places above its GNI per capita ranking. Hope that makes sense. Tonga, likewise, 34 places. So these were the countries whose GNI per capita, sorry, the HDI ranking was significantly better than their GNI per capita. So the likes of Cuba and Tonga Samoa, Sri Lanka and Greece indeed. So Greece had a per capita income of $31,000, came 33rd on HDI, but came 53rd in terms of GNI per capita. And in that sense, I think these are good examples of countries that, perhaps because of good healthcare systems, because of commitment to education and things, that can lift their HDI outcomes in terms of basic human capital and health outcomes. And these are countries the reverse in a way. These countries, with the exception of Ivory Coast and Djibouti, but some of these countries have very, very high GNI per capita, but don't do quite as well on HDI. So, for example, Qatar, the second richest country in the world with 95% GNI per capita, $95,000 GNI per capita. Second in terms of GNI per capita, 40th in terms of HDI. Kuwait likewise. Top 20 country for GNI per capita, but 49th when it comes to HDI. And of course, this is a reflection of the fact that income per capita and high incomes or middle income countries don't necessarily achieve the HDI outcomes that one would expect for a country with that level of income per head. So all of these countries lag, their HDI ranking lags their GNI per capita. And it's good, important evaluation. Let's finish off with a couple of slides on income inequality. So again, pivoting the tables, there is an income inequality adjusted HDI now, but it doesn't form part of the basic measure. So what I've done here is chosen the 7 countries in the world with the highest published and measured Gini coefficient. Not every nation publishes data on income inequality that will make it into the table. So South Africa last year had the highest Gini coefficient by some distance. Maybe think about how you draw the Lorenz curve diagram for a country like South Africa. A Gini coefficient of 63 or 0.63. Obviously, 100 would be the perfect inequality, 0 perfect equality. Namibia, Zambia, Brazil and Colombia have included in there. So those are the countries with the highest income inequality. And most of them, in fact the majority of them, have an HDI ranking well above 100. But I've also shown there the data on income shares accruing to the poorest 40%, to the richest 10% and to the richest 1%. And you might want to think about those figures. Interesting, we then can create a Palmer ratio. So the Palmer ratio is an alternative measure of income inequality. And how do you measure it? Well, you take the income share of the richest 10% and divide by the income share of the poorest 40%. Now, in the vast majority of countries in the world, with the possible exception of countries like Slovenia and Sweden, the Palmer ratio is well above 1, meaning that the richest 10% have a multiple share of income compared to the bottom 40%. Now, South Africa has the highest Palmer ratio, a ratio of 7. So the richest 10% take home 7 times the accumulated income of the poorest 40%. Obviously, that figure comes down as you go down the table, but in Brazil, it's still 4. So you have 2 measures there of income inequality, the Palmer ratio and the Gini coefficient, both, I think, worth knowing about. So there we go, a quick look at the latest data for the 2023 Human Development Report. Thanks for joining in on this video. If it was useful, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Obviously, lots more content as we head into the spring and towards the exams. Take care and see you soon.